Alrighty. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for joining. Um, we are still studying the 25th word, which is about the miraculousness of the Quran. We started the third light last week, I believe, consisting of 3 gleams. And we covered the first gleam, which had something to do with how the Quran's verses scatter the darkness of unbelief by spreading the light of miraculousness and guidance. Today, we're going to start the second gleam. So, Bismillah. The second gleam. Since just how far the human philosophy, which challenges Quranic wisdom, has fallen in the face of that wisdom, has been explained and illustrated with comparisons in the 12th word and proved in the other words. We refer readers to those treatises and for now offer a further comparison from another point of view. It is as follows. Human science and philosophy look at the world as fixed and constant, and they speak and they discuss the nature of beings and their characteristics in detail. If they do speak of their duties before their maker, they speak of them briefly. Quite simply, they speak only of the decoration and letters of the book of the universe and attach no importance to its meaning. Whereas the Quran looks at the world as transient, passing, deceptive, traveling, unstable, and undergoing revolution. It speaks briefly of the nature of beings and their superficial and material characteristics, but mentions in detail the worshipful duties with which they are charged by their Maker, and how, in what respects, they point to His names and their obedience before the divine creational commands. We shall therefore look at the differences between human philosophy and Quranic wisdom in regard to this matter of looking at things either briefly or in detail, and shall see which is pure truth and reality. A watch in our hand appears to be constant, but its inside is in perpetual upheaval through the motion of the workings and the constant anguish of the cogwheels and parts. In just the same way, together with its apparent stability, this world, which is a huge clock of divine power, is perpetually revolving within upheaval and change, transience and evanescence. Indeed, since time has entered the world, night and day are like a two-headed hand counting the seconds of that huge clock. The years are like a hand counting its minutes, while the centuries count its hours. Thus, time casts the world onto the waves of death and decline. It assigns all the past and the future to non existence, leaving in existence only the present. Together with this form, which time gives the world, with regard to space, also it is like an unstable clock undergoing revolution. For since the space of the atmosphere changes swiftly and quickly passes from one state to another, through being filled and emptied with clouds, sometimes several times a day, it causes changes like a hand counting the seconds. And the space of the earth, which is like the floor of the house of the world, since with life and death, since with life and death, and the animals and plants, its face changes very rapidly, like a minute hand. It shows that this aspect of the world also is transient. And just as the earth is like this in regard to its face, so through the revolutions and upheavals within it and the mountains emerging as a result and disappearing, this aspect of the world is slowly passing also, like an hour hand. And through change, like the movements of the celestial bodies and appearance of comets, the occurrence of solar and lunar eclipses and falling stars, the space of the heavens too, which is like the ceiling of the house of the world, shows that the heavens also are not stable and constant, but are progressing towards old age and destruction. Their change is slow and tardy, like the hand counting the days in a weekly clock, but in every respect it demonstrates that it is transient and passing and heading for destruction. Thus, the world, in regard to the world, has been constructed on these 7 pillars. These pillars perpetually shake it, but when the world, which is thus in motion and being shaken, looks to its maker, the motion and change is the working of the pen of power writing the missives of the eternally besought one. And those changing states are the mirror of the divine names, which, being constantly renewed, display with ever differing depictions the manifestation of the names' qualities. And so, in respect of the world is both transient and hastens towards death, and is undergoing revolution. Although in reality it is departing like flowing water, to the heedless eye it appears to be frozen, due to the idea of nature. It has become dense and turbid, and become a veil concealing the hereafter. Thus, through philosophical investigation and natural science, and the seductive amusements of dissolute civilization and its intoxicated passions, sick philosophy has both increased the world's frozen state and inaction, and made denser heedlessness, and increased its opaqueness with and turbidity, and caused the maker and the hereafter to be forgotten, whereas with its verses, by the mount of revelation, by a book inscribed, when the event inevitable comes to pass, the day of noise and clamor. What is the day of noise and clamor? These seem to be separate verses that Nursi has grouped together. First two, Surah 52, verse 1 and 2. The second, Surah 56, verse 1. The third, Surah 101, verse 1. So, whereas with its verses, the Quran cards the world in regard to the world like cotton, and casts it away through its expositions, like, do they see nothing in the government of the heavens and the earth? Do they not look at the sky above them, how we have made it? Do the unbelievers not see that the heavens and the earth were joined together before we clove them asunder? It gives the world a transparency and removes its turbidity through its light scattering illuminations. Like, God is the light of the heavens and the earth. What is the life of this world but play and amusement? It melts the frozen, inactive world. Through its death tainted expressions, like when the sun is folded up, when the sky is cleft asunder, when the sky is rent asunder, and the trumpet will be sounded, and all that are in the heavens and all that are on earth will fall down senseless, except such that it pleases God to exempt. It smashes the delusion that the world is eternal. Through its thunderous blasts, like he knows what enters within the earth and what comes forth out of it, what comes down from the skies and what mounts up to them. And he is with you wherever you may be, and God sees all that you do. And say, praise be to God, who will show you his signs, so that you shall know them. And your sustainer is not unmindful of all that you do. It scatters the heedlessness born of the notion of nature. Thus, from beginning to end, the Quran's verses, which are turned towards the universe, proceed according to this principle. They reveal and display the reality of the world as it is through showing just how ugly the world is. It turns man's face from it and points out the beautiful world's beautiful face, which looks to the Maker. It fastens man's eye on that. It instructs in true wisdom and knowledge, teaching the meanings of the book of the universe and looking infrequently at the letters and decorations. It does not cause the meaning to be forgotten like drunken philosophy, nor make man enamored of the ugly and waste his time on meaningless things due to the decoration of the letters. Um, so generally, this second gleam seems to compare and contrast human philosophy to Quranic wisdom, where human philosophy seems to see the world as its own entity that sustains itself and is separate from uh, being dependent on something else. It's its own little ecosystem, self-subsisting, whatever it is. Whereas the Quranic idea is that everything is dependent on the sustainer, and that he has a hand, he plays a hand on every occurrence that happens. That things are not just it cannot be explained as just natural, that they just happen by themselves. Any questions, comments, or concerns at this point in the text, or in this point in the discussion? Anything stand out on the surface? If not, we'll go deeper into it, maybe line by line or paragraph by paragraph. Yusuf, would you like to speak?
Assalamu alaikum. So today I was passing the traffic light, and as I am waiting, since Brother Birkan was not next to me, there's this urge in me to pass in the red light. But there was a big truck coming from the other side, like these very big ones. So while waiting in the traffic light, I thought maybe I shouldn't pass because the truck is coming. It's not worth risking. So I was just waiting there in tranquility. So I thought, what if my death is going to come with that truck? I don't know. This is why I am comfortably waiting here, as if it's not going to happen. But if somehow from the unseen a news were to come and say that 4 seconds later, this truck that's coming towards you, something is going to happen. Maybe the wheel of the truck is just going to dislocate and come to your face or something like that, doesn't matter. And you are going to die in 4 seconds later. Would I still stand here with this tranquility? So what made me heedless at that moment was, world is stable, life is stable, it's going to continue like that for as long as it goes. So this is why I was not worried. I think this might be a practical example of what the author is saying in here in terms of stability of world. I see as if as long as somebody messes up with it, as long as somebody does not mess up with it, it continues. Like, it's a stable environment. Life is stable, everything is stable. When it comes to my personal life, yeah, I will leave. Like, life continues, and it will continue, it must continue. But Quran's worldview is not like that. Quran is actually constantly reminding me of death is near, and everything is changing. Every moment is dying right in front of your eyes. Why does Quran do that? So that I'm not going to get stuck with what I am seeing in front of my eyes, but rather by showing that it is just passing away, it's attracting my attention to it cannot be for itself, because if it was for itself, it's dying. So waking me up from that dream of loving the transient things and saying that this is not the purpose of this existence. On the other hand, the philosophy is telling me or wanting me to fall into the trap of saying, well, life continues, life is good, life is beautiful. It is beautiful in and of itself. So I will keep enjoying it. And although this is despite the fact that it is dying moment by moment, I close my eyes and pretend as if it's not dying and try my best to enjoy the most. So since this was a super recent memory, I thought it fits well with the theme of today's discussion, so I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that, Brother Yusuf. And yeah, it does help illustrate we how we take things for granted, or how we expect things to always happen. Like cars will stay on the street and avoid the sidewalk. Something as mundane as that, that you're safe on this location, but not 1 foot away. You could get killed, and we find security in these things. But how safe is that, right? How guaranteed, how much of a guarantee do you get from that? There's accidents that happen. People, cars and people end up in whatever location. And so maybe we shouldn't, or we should have at least a healthy skepticism of these things that we believe so strongly. That give us a sense of security. Brother Bir Khan, would you like to say something?
Jazakallah khairan. I'd like to ask a question, maybe to Yusuf, since it is his example, but to everyone. So in his example, the truck is moving, Yusuf is moving, that is coming, the things are changing, even in his, as he called, heedless state. But in the text, the author says the non-Quranic worldview assume things to be frozen or fixed, stable. So what does the author exactly mean with this? Because there's no worldview in which truck is not moving, or Yusuf is not, walking. So what does he mean with something is being fixed or frozen?
Yusuf, would you? Yeah, you can speak.
I think by truck is moving, I'm living, but life is life. My comfortable life is stable. So this is what is constant in here. Or imagine a city which is like, let's say Philadelphia is a city in which to a certain extent peace is going on. And based on that, since I see that life in this city is stable, I am thinking of making an investment in such and such neighborhood because it looks more stable, for instance. So I think this, the mental image of that city, which is a living city, it's a lot of things are moving in there. But in my head, it's like a city which is comfortable, which is going to be comfortable for the foreseeable future. So that stability is in there. I guess we can apply to the economy. By definition, economy is something that constantly based on buying and selling. But if I feel like, yeah, American economy is good, it's stable. What I mean by that, it is at a good state, beneficial, I can benefit from it. And it stays like that, and it's going to stay like this, nothing for me to worry about. So I think this is what I take as stability. And when it comes to nature, because the author is saying that the idea of nature is really making things, seeing things as stable or constant, which is, I say, water. Water is water in and of itself. It is always water. It's going to stay as water. Winter is winter, summer is summer, and there's the cycle of winter to summer, but it is still a stable cycle which exists in there and will always be in there. So I guess this is what I am taking as stable.
Brother Birkan, does his answer satisfy your question?
Oh, yes, it does. Jazakallah khairan. So I guess the key word here, as Yusuf mentioned, is the nature. So when we say nature, it encompasses all the rules or all the states that, like, we assume that the trucks will continue moving no matter what, right? There will be always trucks that are moving, or the objects, they will always move, unless, of course, being stopped by some force. But even this force will be part of the nature, so it will be always the same rules running. And I guess the verses at the very end, some of them are challenging this idea, right? When the sun is folded, what was it? When the sun is folded up, when the sky is cleft asunder, just the opposite of, what we take as granted. When the sky is rent asunder. So I guess Quran is challenging our idea of natural laws or natural, let's say, stability of the nature.
Yeah, indeed. Could your analogy of the truck moving could be described as Newton's third law of motion, that an object in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by a equal or greater force. And I guess maybe the Quran is saying these laws of physics, they you can't take them for granted. We take them as laws, right? These are absolutes. The question is, what are these laws based on? And certainly, our observations and whatever we witness. Anyways, I'll go paragraph by paragraph. Maybe we can, hone into some specifics things. So since just how far the human philosophy which challenges Quranic wisdom has fallen in the face of that wisdom has been explained and illustrated with comparisons in the 12th word, proved in the other words, we refer readers to those treatises and for now offer a further comparison from another point of view. Okay, so this section is gonna talk more about human philosophy that challenges Quranic wisdom. It has been described in previous words for reference. But human science and philosophy look at the world as fixed and constant, and they discuss the nature of beings and their characteristics in detail. If they do speak of their duties before their maker, they speak of them briefly. Quite simply, they speak only of the decoration and letters of the book of the universe and attach no importance to its meaning, whereas the Quran looks at the world as transient, passing, deceptive, traveling, unstable, and undergoing revolution. It speaks briefly of the nature of beings and their superficial and material characteristics, but mentions in detail the worshipful duties with which they are charged by the Maker and how and in what respects they point to his names and their obedience before the divine creational commands. We shall therefore look at the differences between human philosophy and Quranic wisdom in regards to this matter of looking at things either briefly or in detail, and shall see which is pure truth and reality. So I guess we were talking a little bit about this before, how science and philosophy looks at the world as a fixed and constant things, not literally fixed and still, but that the rules, we can say the rules that govern reality, which we might call nature, we might call them natural law, we might call it, right? Just things that we expect, the seasons, gravity, um, all sorts of things, day and night, any sort of repetitive expectations of what happens. These things are human science and philosophy, whereas he's saying that the Quranic wisdom or worldview looks at things as transient. That passing, deceptive. Where the example is, yeah, there is day and night there, but there's also an end to this or something like that. I guess it is a little difficult for me to understand it exactly. It seems they could agree on transience, but maybe not to what it means, right? Maybe that refers to the fixed and constantness. I guess we just talked about this a little bit. That the rule is there, then that rule never changes. But for the Quranic worldview, the rule itself can change, and it will change. I don't know. Any comments or questions about this paragraph here, Brother Yusuf?
So I am thinking of, like, this is a fundamental difference, the way Quran looks at it and the way human science and human philosophy looks at it. Because in one side, which is quite familiar to us, like human science and philosophy, it's talking about the world, it's treating it as like, I guess we discussed or mentioned this probably before in the discussions, like as if looking at the universe as you would look at a book, but without thinking that it's a book. We just talk about how letters are located relative to each other. So in such a case, since the meaning is not there, since it's not a book for you, you simply talk about just the letters and their relative positions with respect to each other. So in Quran's way, though, it's a letter. Oh yeah, it's a letter, and it refers to this. Yeah, like you just briefly mentioned that it's a letter or it's a style of writing the letter, but immediately you start talking about its meaning because it's a book, and book makes sense as long as there is a meaning. Otherwise, like dwelling too much on the superficiality is irrelevant. So in this regard, Quran is, the way it speaks actually, is telling us, giving us a big lesson, sort of telling me what I should put more emphasis in my life. Because I'm practically thinking about me. What do I invest more? I find myself to be investing more in material part of the existence rather than the passing part. Because if I knew today that this truck was going to hit me, the remaining seconds of mine, I mean, even if I'm not going to start doing anything else, I wouldn't worry about the meeting that I'm going to attend supposedly 5 minutes later. At least this wouldn't be there. Like such things that I worry too much and prioritize over other things should change. And Quran is teaching me that by how fundamentally it's looking at the world in a different way. So maybe, I mean, if nothing else, this aspect of Quran I should take some lesson from. And this is why repetitively Quran mentions death of human, death of nations, death of the whole creation, like Qiyamah. But it's a very repeating theme in Quran, because my perception is the exact opposite of that. I feel as if everything is stable, everything is going to stay like that. And on top of this false perception, then there's this false narrative that I hear from science and philosophy, which says, yeah, they are laws. Law means constantly things are repeating. Like there's this repeating pattern. The pattern is in there, but interpreting it as if the pattern exists in and of itself and the constancy, the stability exists in and of itself, gives me the false perception that I am also constant. Although whenever I look at the mirror, I start seeing more and more white hair. Whenever I see my friends, which have been my friends for so long, and now when I see them, I see that they're getting old, which means I am getting old. So it's hard for me to accept myself getting old, but likewise, Birkan does not accept getting old for himself. But when I see Birkan, I know that he is getting old. So he cannot trick me. Maybe he can trick himself. I can trick myself, but Birkan cannot trick me in turn, which means I'm getting old. So this Quran's repetitive mentioning of this aspect of world is to wake me up from my dream, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for that. Brother Bir Khan.
Jazakallah khairan, Yusuf, especially for your, jokes about being old. So if he's referring to my glasses, they're just for style, not because, I have difficulties with reading or anything. But anyway, so with the example he gave about the book, so when we look at the letters, he said, what is important, what they mean. And this is true. And this is true to the extent that, so you wouldn't care at all, for instance, whether the letter A is changing or not. When you look at the apple, the word apple. So if you look at the material aspect, the material meaning here, the letters of the aspect of this word apple, you have a constancy there in the book, right? It seems like. But maybe the better example would be a movie in which the word or the object apple will change from one frame to another frame. But if you are interested in the meaning, you don't care whether the object is changing or not. So it's such an importance. And to make it more clear to human beings, Creator does change the objects all the time. So when you look at the apple, a real apple this time, not the, the picture of it or the word apple, in the creation, your life in the marketplace, for instance, you will see that the apple is changing constantly from 1 second to another second. If you look apple from one angle, its color will be slightly different. If you look at from another angle, its color will be, again, slightly different. So it's constantly changing. It's almost a different apple. In reality, this almost is extra. So it is a different apple. So it's changing constantly. What is not changing? What it refers to, its creator, the meaning it brings you. But what we do in our life, in our perception of our life, with our philosophy, with our science, we assume the apple that we see in front of us, it's not changing. It's the same apple. It is the same apple. Maybe its features, its properties is changing from one time to another, but it's still the same apple, we assume. And again, I guess this is a big, one emphasis that author is making when he talks about that the philosophy assumes things not changing. According to philosophy, the identity of things, identity of objects, like an apple or Yusuf, right? Yusuf, in his example, for instance, would assume it is the same track approaching to him. It is the same Yusuf himself that is walking. So we assume that the things are not changing in that regard. They are the same, very same objects all the time. But in the text and in the Quran, it is emphasized that the things are changing constantly, to the extent you will have like a huge difficulty to try to call them the same object. The ball in front of you is not the same ball a second later. But when it comes to meaning, which is what is emphasized in Quran, the names, what the meaning, I don't mean, the meaning, the notion of apple. What I mean, the one who creates apple, the one who this is sustain life through apple, the one who creates apple in a delicious way to show his love to his servants. These ideas, this meaning, it doesn't change. It is what what is fixed behind all these changing things. And because everything is changing constantly, both spatially and temporally, we have no chance, no other opportunity but just to discard their, how they look, what they are, their material aspects, and look for the meaning. Although this is, reality, we are so heedless that despite everything is changing constantly, we call them as fixed entities. We say it is the same pillow, it is the same truck, it is the same person. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. That is very helpful to understand it in that sense that, everything that we see is not the same thing from one moment to another, that it is a new creation. And I think, that is a more correct understanding of the world, of how it exists. And it it makes me feel more aware, at the very least, of God's presence and interaction with the world. So we can move on to the next paragraph. A watch in our hand appears to be constant, but its inside is in perpetual upheaval through the motion of the workings and the constant anguish of the cogwheels and parts. In just the same way, together with its apparent stability, this world, which is a huge clock of divine power, is perpetually revolving within upheaval and change, transience and evanescence. Indeed, since time has entered the world, night and day are like a two-headed hand counting the seconds of that huge clock. The years are like a hand counting its minutes, while the centuries count its hours. Thus, time casts the world onto the waves of death and decline. It assigns all the past and the future to non-existence, leaving in existence only the present. And so, yeah, we're giving an example of how the world seems to be fixed, using traditional, just traditional understanding of the world, but behind the surface, there is a complex mechanism of motion and movement that we are not aware of, rather, Yusuf.
So, for instance, as I said, I don't recognize that I'm getting old because day by day, changes are happening in my body, but maybe I don't recognize that. The author is making use of this clock analogy here because how would you know if a clock is working? Like if you just look at the hour arm, or is it called arm? Yeah, hour arm of the clock. Yeah. You wouldn't recognize whether it is working or not unless you look more carefully for a long time. But if you simply look at the second arm of it, you will recognize that it's changing. But all of them are moving actually. So if I pay attention, I wake up in the morning like healthy, no tiredness, no nothing. But by the time the day comes to a finish, I feel like my energy is also finishing. So this is reminding me that, well, I consumed something since the morning. And as I see the white hair again, which is now more like an hour or arm in my clock, then I realize, oh, this white hair, this repetitive movement of day to night of my life was taking something away from me. I was changing. And see, after 30 some years, I started having those white hair, which is now showing that actually things are slowly but surely changing in me. So the author applies the same to the world that I live in. Day and night is moving. What else? Years are changing. And then the centuries are changing. And at the end, he's going to complete it to 7. But in this paragraph, he just counted 3. But he says this in this clock of creation, with the time that it changes, the constant change, constant movement is showing us that things are changing. And when we look back, we can realize many things have changed. Like when we see those dinosaur bones, for example, we can say that, oh, there used to be those creatures however many millions years ago, and they're not here anymore. Or when we go and look at the ruins of previous nations, we then say, oh, many things have changed. Because when I look at the skyscrapers in Philadelphia or look at Manhattan, I say, well, is this civilization really going to become ruined like the Egyptians or the Romans were ruined at some point? It looks too far ahead, and I feel like, well, maybe it will not. Look at this strength here, the power here. But probably another Yusuf walking in the streets of Egypt at some point felt the same 2,000, 3,000 years ago. And now look at the ruins of Egypt and the pyramids. So, which means those past also tells me that relative to 2,000 years ago, the changes that I observe today is also telling me that, or even the nations and the centuries, everything is dying, everything is changing. And in the following paragraph, I guess there are going to be 4 more steps that he is going to count, which again points to this constant change.
Yeah, thank you for giving us another example or elaborating on what uh, Nursi is making a reference to here. And yeah, I think it's a little. I think it's a little easy to understand that the world is constantly in motion, and that we can see signs of it even if we're not, paying close attention to it. We still see it. Um, so I'll continue unless there's any other comments or questions. So together with this form which time gives the world, with regard to space, also it is like an unstable clock undergoing revolution. For since the space of the atmosphere changes swiftly and quickly passes from one state to another, through being filled and emptied with clouds, sometimes several times a day, it causes change like a hand counting the seconds. And the space of the earth, which is like the floor of the house of the world, since with life and death and the animals and plants, its face changes very, very rapidly, like a minute hand. It shows that this aspect of the world also is transient. And just as the earth is like this in regard to its face, so through the revolutions and upheavals within it, and the mountains emerging as a result and disappearing, this aspect of the world is slowly passing also like an hour hand. And through change, like the movements of the celestial bodies, the appearance of comets, the occurrence of solar and lunar eclipses and falling stars, the space of the heavens too, which is like the ceiling of the house of the world, shows that the heavens are not stable and constant, but are progressing towards old age and destruction. Their change is slow and tardy, like the hand counting the days in a weekly clock, but in every respect it demonstrates that it is transient and passing and heading for destruction. And so we're getting uh, examples of the various different hands, right? The various different sort of units of passage of time. You have the seconds, changes that happened instantaneously, things that happen a little bit more slowly, and like a minute hand, and then something like an hour hand and a day hand and a weekly hand, and then things like comets and stuff that happen maybe every 70 years, just to show that the various types of things that are affected by change, even something as big and strong as a mountain, right? It undergoes some change, even if it's not very obvious or visible. But even that, and just to prove that everything is in constant motion, and change. Any comments or questions? Yes, Brother Birkan.
I have one question. So the point that you just raised, that there are different grades of change. So some things changing slowly, some things changing very fast, or more frequently, however you want to call. So why? What does it mean? Like, what is the purpose or message behind it? I'm not asking this to, as a rhetoric question. I'm not asking this to, teach you something. I really don't know. So, like, what is the message behind it? Because author is talking about, what they mean, how they refer to different names of God. So these differences in speed of change, what do they tell us? I wonder.
That's an excellent question for sure. I mean, if we just understood these changes for what they are, we'd just be looking at the letters and investigating the scripts for what they are and not the meaning behind it. Does anyone have an answer to Brother Birkan's question? What is the purpose of being witnesses to the change that exists around us? Brother Yusuf.
Just some quick thought, if it makes sense. So this gradually increasing amounts of change is inviting me to get to know the greatness of the Creator. It's as if He is the one who turns all those cogwheels of increasing sizes. First, I see because I noticed the change in the second hand or arm of the clock. But then, let's say I can relate to it. It is somehow, maybe I make some changes in my room. And if I see a similar change in the outside, I can compare it, that sort of a thing, with my power, with my relative power, and then say, oh yeah, I apply this much power and make this change, and somebody outside is applying this much power or require this much knowledge and make this change. But then it becomes like a measuring stick for me. And then as I see a bigger change, I say, oh, this should also require knowledge and power, but more than what is needed to turn this smaller smaller arm of the clock. Then I see a bigger circle. I see a much wider circle or much larger arm of the clock. So eventually it helps me to extrapolate the understanding or grow the meaning of grandeur of the Creator. And eventually then I will say, oh, once I realize that actually they are all the arms of the same clock, and all of them are being turned by the same hand, same power, including the things that I thought I was doing, then I will realize, oh, He is all powerful. But I guess in order for me to be able to appreciate it, it needs to start with something, at least as a human, this is how I learn, something that I can relate to, which is that is something within my reach, with something that I can change within my small, limited life. And this is why maybe I am getting excited to change something in another person's life, or within society. I am trying to make some sort of a change, trying to come up with a bright idea, and I'm trying to, let's say, come up with a new vaccine or whatever. And the Creator is giving me that sort of a push, saying that, okay, I allow you to pretend as if you are making this change. So just take it. Again, I am the one who is making the change, but for now, let's assume you are doing it. But you are going to become very much immersed in it. Oh, this is my finding, or this is my change. I made this change. It says, okay, keep it for yourself for now. But with that, I will try learning more and more changes to eventually be able to say, Allahu Akbar. Allah is greatest, greater than everything that I came across.
So yeah, I definitely agree with your point that these show the power of the creator, being able to be in control of all these different things, you know, all at the same time, right? The fineness that is required to make a change on the second level, right? Just the passage of a second, right? The change that occurs maybe within the atoms or something, and then also the power that is needed to make a change on the level of galaxies or something like that, right? It's very impressive. Um, but for me, this also points to for like the unchanging ability of God, that He does not change, right? That I'm not sure exactly why or how where the connection is, but you know, it maybe it points to um yeah, like the negation of that ilaha illallah, that all these things are changing, you know, they cannot be God. That if there is a God, there has to be one that doesn't change. I think that's what I also see in all of these things. Any further comments or questions? Alrighty, moving on. Thus, the world, in regard to the world, has been constructed on these 7 pillars. These pillars perpetually shake it, but when the world, which is thus in motion and being shaken, looks to its maker, the motion and change is the working of the pen of power writing the missives of the eternally besought one. And those changing states are the mirrors of the divine names, which being constantly renewed, display with ever differing depictions the manifestation of the names as qualities. I'll read this one more time. Thus, the world, in regard to the world, has been constructed on these 7 pillars. These pillars perpetually shake it, but when the world, which is thus in motion and being shaken, looks to its maker, the motion and change is the working of the pen of power, writing the missives of the eternally besought one. And those changing states are the mirrors of the divine names, which being constantly renewed, display with ever differing depictions the manifestation of the names as qualities. So this Nursi seems to be making a connection between the changes that occur in the world, the things that we witness, and how those are reflections of the divine names in constancy, in a constant flux, that everything is a reflection, and it's just the different qualities, right? God has different qualities and can manifest different qualities, and what we witness is all of these in whatever light that we see them. Brother Yusuf.
And while he is going through these words, again, I mean, of course, this chapter, the 25th word, is about miraculousness of Quran. So he is indeed writing a commentary on Quran. But the words that he is using in here, and one of the verses that's going to come at the bottom of this page, he is saying as if the motion and the change is the working of the pen of power writing the missives of eternally besought one. It's a very beautiful way of looking at the creation. And actually, this is reminding me of 2 to 3 verses in the Quran. So the one that he is going to mention at the bottom is by the mount of revelation, by a book inscribed, وَالطُّورِ وَكِتَابٍ مَسْطُورٍ, or another verse again, Nun وَالْقَلَمِ وَمَا يَسْطُرُونَ. So like swearing upon Nun wal qalami wa ma yasturun, swearing upon the pen and the thing that the pen inscribed, writes within an order. Yeah. So an author in here is saying that this pen and what it writes is, as the Quran is mentioning those pen, it is the creation. And this constant change is because the pen is moving over the paper. The creation is being written right now, right in front of your eyes. And from one, if you like, from right to left, it's being written. And you yourself is this tip of pen. If I think about my consciousness, as if I am also a part of this tip of pen, or I am sitting on the pen, and the book called Yusuf is being written, and I am simply watching what is being written there. So very beautifully, Quran is reminding me that this is a book. Its author has a purpose by what he is writing in the book, and you are being observed with that. And it is so much of a clear proof, it must be, that the Quran is at the beginning of surahs. Like one of them is وَالطُّورِ وَكِتَابٍ مَسْطُورٍ, is again beginning of a chapter, Surah At-Tur, I guess. It should be number 3 in the screen now. I don't know the chapter number, but and then Nun wal qalami wa ma yasturun. Again, these are, before making any statement, Quran, if the chapter starts by saying by day and night, by the Mount of Revelation, so as if Quran is going to make a statement, but before making this statement, showing some evidence to build the following statements on top of these. So those initial verses should be self-evident then, because they're being used as evidence to something else. So a book that is being inscribed is such evident that Quran is using it as an evidence to what he's going to say next. So in Quran's worldview, then, he is just attracting our attention to the exact opposite of what we get used to. What is it that we get used to? We feel like the universe is stable, constant, happens by itself. Quran says, no, it's not stable. It is constantly changing. I keep writing it. It is the book, and I keep writing that book. And because of this self-evident fact, then he talks about, in the following verses, it talks about death and then resurrection, saying that as it is self-evident for you that this book is being written right now, it's changing, don't you see, constantly? And this is what's going to follow. You're going to die. The universe is going to die. There's going to be a qiyamah. And let me tell you, something that is coming next, and at least as evident, as self-evident, as clear, is your resurrection. So beautifully, Quran talks about this book that is being written.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Yusuf, for that comment. Sister Saira, would you like to say something?
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Yes, thank you so much. Just briefly joined in. Alhamdulillah, really benefiting from the conversations you were all having. As I'm reading through this particular couple of paragraphs, I wanted to bring to attention Surah Inshiqaq and Surah Tawqir. Both of them bring such depth to the finality of life as we know, in terms of the end of this world as we know, and also how we can consider our own sort of coming to terms with the idea that the flow of existence as creation that we are ourselves, and the surroundings and the environments that Allah Ta'ala says that He has created for us, ultimately everything goes away, it dies, except the face of Allah Ta'ala will remain. And then everything will be recreated again in shapes that He sometimes has told us in the Quran and in shapes that we don't know. So as you were talking, I was thinking about diversity, and in the world today, how diversity, and ever since humans have been born, even since Adam alayhi salam was deceived by shaitan, the issue of diversity is always there. Allah Ta'ala gives an example that I am not going to have anyone like me, because if there were two gods, they were going to have conflict. And so in humans, we know, and also we know in animal kingdom and also in plants, the territorial nature of survival is always there. But with Allah, that is not the case, because He is above all. So indeed, He is Al-Qadir. And why I mentioned Surah Tawqir, because sometimes in the morning I listen to the English version of Quran translation, the clear Quran online. And the way perhaps the brother who is narrating it speaks about, I'll just take a couple of ayah from Surah Tawqir 81, where Allah Ta'ala says, when the sun is rolled up, when the stars are dimmed, when the mountains are set in motion, when the relationships are suspended, when the beasts are gathered, when the oceans are set aflame, when the souls are paired, when the girl buried alive is asked, for what crime was she killed? Then when the records are made public, when the sky is peeled away, when the fire is set ablaze, when paradise is brought near, each soul will know what it has readied. I swear by galaxies, Alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala is swearing by His creation, precisely running their courses, and by the night as it recedes, and by the morn as it breathes. This is the speech of a noble messenger, endowed with power, eminent with the Lord of the throne, obeyed and honest. Your friend is not possessed. He saw him on the luminous horizon, and he does not withhold knowledge of the unseen, which is speaking about Al-Miraj. And it is not the word of an accursed devil. So where are you heading? And that particular 26th verse really gives me shivers. Where are we heading? Home, heaven, Jannah, or are we gathering our souls in a destructive way and bringing it towards Nauzubillah, hell? So this whole flow of time and the time on earth, the life on earth is but like a repository of witnessing Allah Ta'ala's will. And He often says in Quran, to whom I want to give children and whom I don't give children. However, I fashion someone, however, I don't. Whoever I brings to haqq and straight path, and whoever I don't. He keeps that omnipotent power in His hand. And then Allah Ta'ala says, but you, sorry, even in this surah, the last three verses are, it is only a reminder to all mankind, to whoever of you wills to go straight. But you cannot will unless God wills, the Lord of the worlds. So Alhamdulillah, I really appreciate this circle that we have here. I know I'm the only sister in this gathering right now, but Jazakallah khair, brothers, for everybody having a conversation and reflection on this deep, deep topic. The more we learn about Quran, the less we feel that we are satisfied with, because it is just indeed the book that, thank God, Allah Ta'ala chose for us as Muslims and Muslimas to benefit from, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Oh, Yakum, we appreciate your company, your attending us here today. And I would remind you or inform you that you are not the only sister here gathered
Oh,
today.
and okay, no.
Khadija Beza is also here with us.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I saw her. Yeah, Jazakallah. Great.
Yeah, but I do appreciate your comments and the verses that you have brought up. It's I guess maybe a reminder that the changes or that we see the witness that we witness, that they are only temporary, and it's not just to show off Allah's power. What it certainly does, but there's a purpose behind it, that it's a reminder, telling us to think about where we are headed, where that all these things have an end, and they are revealing their own temporal nature, and that we also will end one day, and we will. It's not over. That there's a part two somewhere that we will be headed towards, depending on how we live our life. Any other comments or questions? I'll go ahead and read the next paragraph. And so, in respect of the world is both transient. Brother Birkan, would you like to speak?
I'm sorry for the interruption. This is about what is already being said, so I didn't want to wait. So
okay.
Just one maybe emphasis. When we talk about the book inscribed, or the kalam, the pen, that pencil, or doesn't matter, that's writing it. I think Quran does not make an analogy. I mean, it is an analogy that it's not talking about a real book, but when it comes to inscribing, when it comes to writing, it is a writing or inscribing in a real sense, that everything in front of you is being written down with a pen. So they are being created in front of you, dot by dot. Just like when you write, you kind of, you put multiple dots and combine them, right? With every stroke of your pen, a new dot is added to the letter or the shape that you draw. So dot by dot, the piece by piece is being written in front of you. It is more powerful than a simple analogy. So when we are fixed, when we are, let's say, so heedless and cannot get rid of this philosophical understanding of the universe, the most we can think of the universe is as, the universe is fixed, the letters are there, it's like a book. And we read it and we get the meaning of it. That's the most we can do, because our minds are still shaped by a non-changing nature. That the universe is in front of us as a whole, right? We see the entire universe as it is. So this is our heedless minds thinking. And we read it and we understand it. As if I'm holding the words, the book, in front of me. It is, I don't know how many pages, more than 750, let's say, pages, and I hold it as a whole. It is fixed. It's in front of me. I can change any page and I can look. And if I'm like someone like Yusuf, I would even know what is even written on page, let's say 483, without even looking at it. But Quran says, no, nature is not, or the universe is not like this. Yes, it is like a book, but it is being written constantly. So it's dynamic, it's changing constantly. It's being created constantly. So the ayahs that Yusuf were referring, they are so powerful indeed, because this inscription, or the universe being inscribed, or the creator talking about kalam, the pen. It's so important. It changes our understanding of the entire reality. It's not just a simple analogy. It's not, trying to just give a lesson by using fancy words. Or it's not like, just like many others, Mufassir says, the Quran is talking about the intellectual, the capacity of human being, and the kalam, the pen, is just a referral to it. We write things, which is the important capacity of human being, and so on. It is true to some extent. On a, let's say, a surface level, it is a truth. But Quran, by saying pen, and by saying the book inscribed, the book that is being written, it's changing our entire understanding of the universe. It's saying that everything in front of you being written, it's not written, it is being written. You will realize that every letter is being written in front of you. The change is so fundamental. So the universe is so dynamic. So I just wanted to say that, and my daughter is looking at me with an angry face, so I have to stop here.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment, Brother Birkan. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for emphasizing that, we should understand the pen and the mentioning of the pen, uh, pen of power, writing, the word, writing the creation, or being used to constantly renew the creation, as opposed to a book that is complete, that is, already, published, and you can read through it front to back, whereas we live in the reality where the book is constantly being written and updated, and it's has not ended yet, and that's a very different perspective to have than maybe if the book was already written and we're just going through some completed pages. So yeah, I'll go with the next paragraph. And so, in respect of the world is both transient and hastens towards death, and is undergoing revolution, although in reality it is departing like flowing water. To the heedless eye, it appears to be frozen due to the idea of nature. It has become dense and turbid, and become a veil concealing the hereafter. Thus, through philosophical investigation and natural science, and the seductive amusement of dissolute civilization and its intoxicated passions, sick philosophy has both increased the world's frozen state and inaction, and made denser heedlessness, and increased its opaqueness and turbidity, and caused the maker and the hereafter to be forgotten. So before I move on to the Quranic verses, I might I would like to discuss how once again, how the transience that we witness, how it can be seen as frozen, right? As Nursi was describing, due to the idea of nature, and how it's being diluted, and all these sorts of things. It's a little abstract for me, and maybe we can discuss it one more time. So anyone can help me out, or anyone have any comments or questions on this matter? Brother Yusuf.
So again, in this paragraph also, the author is, I believe, referring to a lot of Quranic verses, because and although explicitly he is not referring to them, but in the original text, the words that he uses are Quranic words. I mean, he could have used some Turkish words, but he prefers to using some Quranic terminology in there, hinting that actually he is referring to some concepts that are mentioned in the Quran, which I take as interpretation of those verses. For example, he is talking about, like, I'm now quickly scanning the translation as well, but he's talking about just me. Transient hastens toward death and is undergoing revolution. So in the original text, he is using zalzala. Zalzala is إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها. So when the earth gets with like an earthquake, as that chapter would be translated, for instance. But the author in here is as if saying that no, the universe is constantly within zalzala, within this revolution or earthquake, if you like, because it's constantly changing. We feel like earthquakes happens once in a while, but no, it is constantly within a, if you like, zalzala means shaking. It's constantly shaking. Every moment it's shaking. It's as Brother Birkan also mentioned, it's being recreated and recreated. The thing that's being created as if the creation is being written over a whiteboard, being erased, being rewritten again, slightly different, erased, being rewritten again, so on and so forth. So there's this constant movement, constant shaking of the existence. Then we can read Surah Al-Zilzal in this regard. إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. It's not only talking about this one qiyamah that's going to come, but it's actually telling me that qiyamah keeps happening every moment if you pay enough attention. And the author in here is referring to that as well. So although, and also another word again in this sentence, although in reality it is departing like flowing water, in here, for instance, he uses the words rihla, like the life is making rihla, which reminds me of rihlat al-shita'i was-sayf. So anyways, all these are actually Quran's different chapters, but the author, by putting them in this context, interpreting them in a way that it's valid 24/7. It's not once upon a time, yeah, this, for example, for rihlat al-shita'i was-sayf, it looks to li'ila fi Quraysh. Oh yeah, the Quraysh people were tribes that were traveling from like winter to summer. They had these travels. They were living in one place in winter, another place in summer. The author says, no, the creation it's not only for Quraysh. You are Quraysh. The creation is Quraysh. And it is having this rihla, this moving from one place to the other every moment by moment, we move from one place to the other. Nobody is staying still. Check yourself, Atik. Like you have been moving from childhood to young adult, and now you're getting old. You do not stay still. And forcefully, if you like, you are being migrated. So the creation is departing like flowing water. But again, Quran uses another terminology for hearts that are like stone. And for those who have hearts that are like stone, the world that they live in are also like stone. It doesn't change as if, or this is our illusion. And because of that, my heart is becoming like hard stone as well. It's not being like soft. And Quran is saying, for Bani Israel, they saw that Musa alayhi salam's hits the staff, and then the stone exploded and water gushed forth from those stones. What is happening to your hearts, seeing all those creation and still the constant change in the creation, and your heart is hard like stone? It is giving us the hints why it is like this, because I don't see the creation as having those earthquakes or the shaking and constant change. I feel like they are constant and stable and happen by itself, and as if the matter is eternal, I am eternal. Although this is not, I mean, this is the complete opposite of my reality, but I feel like this is the case. So it becomes a veil in front of my eyes to show that there must exist an eternal life, because I don't think of death in the first place. I avoid doing that. I mean, by closing my eyes, I cannot escape from it, but I at least escape from thinking about it as long as I can. So this is why I guess it became like a dense, turbid, became a veil concealing the hereafter. So this is why prophetic way and prophetic way of looking at it, Quranic way of looking at it, constantly, if you like, with its staff of Moses like staff, hits my head with death, constantly reminding me of death and the transience of this world, so that I wake up from this deep sleep. And on the other hand, philosophy, science would tell me that everything, actually, this is why materialist philosophy would like me to accept that the matter is eternal. Okay, we cannot deny that particles are moving from here to there, but particles themselves are eternal. This is how the idea had been since the antique Greek philosophy. The building blocks are eternal. They don't change. The atom was eternal. It doesn't change. Was the building block of their philosophy. Because if it is like that, then yeah, everything is in some sense eternal. There's a cycle, but it's a cycle. Cycle means it's still eternal and stable. Quran says, no, there's no cycle, no nothing. It's all inscription of my pen, and I'm writing it linearly.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the insight, number one, into what Nursi is referring to with his terminology and Quranic references. And yeah, I definitely agree that recognizing the transience of things and one's own transience and death yeah, can lead to understanding that there is a hereafter that we should work towards. Yeah, I guess we can end here. We went a little overtime, but we started late. So are there any closing comments or questions? Feel free to make mention. I'll give us a moment. If not, we can end here. Thank you all for showing up and being a part of this discussion. Inshallah, it was beneficial. And we'll see you guys next week at the same time. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك ونتوب إليك. الفاتحة.